You know, there are days when I catch myself stare at my phone like it's a broken mirror. It reflects pieces of me, but it doesn't show the whole picture. We feel free sliding our fingers across the screen, as if every click is a genuine choice. But is it really? The truth is, we're so immersed in notifications, short videos, and infinite feeds that we forget to ask who's really in control. Freedom has become a product, sold in internet packages with promises of instant happiness. And the strangest part is how harmless it all seems. A like here, a message there, and that's it. Without realizing it, we hand over our attention, the most valuable thing we have, in exchange for digital crumbs. The most dangerous thing of all is that we've grown accustomed to it, as if it's normal to live fragmented, constantly distracted, always on alert. We don't feel the weight of the chains because they're invisible, smooth, even comfortable. But they're there, tightening slowly. And the more we use them, the more trapped we become. This kind of freedom is like a theme park. You can walk wherever you want, as long as you follow the paths someone else decided for you. The illusion is complete, and we don't even notice how much it shapes us. Even our most intimate desires start to resemble what's suggested to us. The algorithm knows more about what we'll like than we do ourselves. And then, I wonder, when did we stop choosing for ourselves? When did pleasure start dictating the rules of our freedom? It's curious how pleasure has been disguised as freedom, but in practice, it's become a kind of gilded leash. The promise is simple. Feel good now. It doesn't matter about tomorrow. It doesn't matter why. Just feel good. A piece of chocolate, a purchase, an easy compliment, and that's it. Instant satisfaction. But what no one talks about is that every time we give into this craving for immediate pleasure, we become more vulnerable, more fragile, like children who can only be calm with candy. And the world, clever as it is, profits from this. Have you noticed how we're always chasing an exit? It's not an exaggeration to think of modern pleasure as a kind of socially accepted drug. Instead of syringes or powder, we use clicks, consumption, superficial entertainment. And the effect is the same, momentary relief, then emptiness. This feeling that something's missing. And then we go back to seeking more. Without realizing it, we enter an emotional cycle where pleasure replaces reflection. We run from pain as if it were a monster, but ironically, it's pain that teaches us. The deeper question is, who do you become when you only act to feel good? Because growth lives in discomfort, in silence, in pause. But we live in a society that hates stopping, that fills every gap with pleasure, even if it's cheap pleasure. And what does this cost us? It costs us presence, depth, awareness. Pain has been criminalized. But what if it were, in fact, the portal, the key to a more genuine kind of freedom, one that doesn't depend on external stimuli? Maybe the answer lies where we least want to look. Sometimes I wonder if we're really living or just being entertained to death. The phrase is heavy, I know, but just look around. It's increasingly hard to find someone who can sit in silence for 5 minutes, just with themselves. It's as if emptiness has become an enemy, something that needs to be filled at any cost. And entertainment has stepped in like a modern anesthetic, a distraction disguised as fun. But what happens when distraction becomes routine and routine becomes a prison? The truth is, no one forces us to do anything anymore. We choose. We're the jailers of our own time, our focus, our minds. We hand it all over voluntarily, with a smile on our faces, as if we believe we're in control. But if you stop to think, who decided you needed to watch 3 episodes in a row before bed? Who defined that your rest always needs a screen nearby? Servitude today is consensual, and perhaps that's the most sophisticated form of domination ever invented. There's a quote from Etienne de la Boétie from the 16th century that has never left my mind. Resolve to serve no more, and you are at once free. He was talking about kings, empires, tyrants. But today the throne is different. It's an apps, an addictive series in constant consumption. And the most tragic part? We don't even notice, because we've grown accustomed to cheap dopamine, to the relief that entertainment offers us. But deep down, what is this costing us? Are we paying too high a price for such accessible pleasure? I grew up hearing that technology would be the key to our freedom. And in many ways, it truly has been. But what no one mentioned is that this same key also opens another door, the door to surveillance, control, subtle manipulation. Today, we have devices in our pockets that know more about us than our closest friends. And that would be liberating if this information were used for our good. But the truth is, it's used to shape desires, predict behaviors, sell promises, and trap attention. It's not just about ads. It's about mental programming disguised as convenience. Platforms have learned that the secret isn't in forcing, but in suggesting. They give you exactly what you want, or rather, what they think you should want. And with that, slowly, they shape your worldview. You think you're choosing, but you're just reacting. Freedom has turned into a simulation of choice, orchestrated by algorithms designed to keep you inside, spinning on the wheel like a modern hamster. One of the greatest dangers is that we feel smart while being manipulated. We use words like artificial intelligence, personalization, user experience, and we think it's wonderful. But are we not just trading our decision for convenience? Is our autonomy not being diluted drop by drop while we smile at the screen? The future has already arrived, but no one shouted. Because, unlike the dictatorships of the past, this new form of domination doesn't impose. It seduces. And the question that remains is, to what extent is this freedom or just another pretty cage? There's something no one teaches us. Pain also has value. In fact, it's one of the few things that puts us face to face with who we really are. But instead of learning to face it, we've been trained to run away. Since childhood, we've heard, don't cry, it'll pass, take this to distract yourself. And so, we grow up terrified of emptiness, discomfort, pause. Silence has become a monster, and pain a flaw. But it's precisely in silence and pain that consciousness resides. And without consciousness, freedom is impossible. Today, any discomfort becomes a trigger to seek immediate pleasure. A slight sadness is reason enough to run to the phone, a doubt to open Google, an anguish to play a video on YouTube and pretend it's not happening. Technology has become a shield against pain, and at the same time, an obstacle to self-knowledge. But those who can't bear to sit in silence with themselves end up being guided by external voices. And when your compass is outside, any wind can throw you off course. The curious thing is that silence bothers us because it reveals. It shines a light on the wounds we try to hide. It exposes how far we are from ourselves. But look, this discomfort is precious. It's not there to punish you, but to wake you up. That's why, sometimes, pain is the only teacher we listen to. When we stop running from it, something changes. And I'm not talking about empty suffering, but the kind of pain that refines us. The pain that, instead of destroying us, polishes us. But those who run from it end up living an anesthetized life, without direction, without roots. There's a question that lingers in many people's minds, but few have the courage to face. What am I living all this for? And I'm not talking about a random philosophical question, but the one that screams in the gaps of routine. The truth is, amid so many stimuli, we forget the essential purpose. We're so busy chasing pleasure that we don't even realize we're becoming emptier, as if we're at a banquet where everything has taste, but nothing has meaning. This is where the greatest paradox of modern hedonism lies. The more pleasure we seek, the less satisfied we become. It's like drinking seawater thinking it'll quench your thirst. The absence of purpose creates a hole. And not knowing how to fill this void, we turn to immediate pleasure. But it only covers it for a moment. Soon, the pain returns. Life starts to feel directionless. We wake up out of obligation, live distracted, sleep exhausted. And so, the days pile up as if existence were a poorly organized file at the bottom of a drawer. Having purpose isn't about finding a grand mission to change the world. Sometimes it's just knowing what truly moves you, what makes your eyes light up, what you'd be willing to do even without applause. It could be creating something, caring for someone, teaching, building, serving. But without this central axis, any pleasure becomes escape. And escape, when it becomes a habit, becomes addictive. That's why so many people, even surrounded by comfort, live in silent crisis. Because deep down they know They weren't made to just distract themselves until they die. Nowadays, it's not enough to be happy. You need to look happy all the time. Social media has taught us that happiness has become a product, something to sell, edit, compare. And when it's treated as a commodity, everything around us starts telling us what we need to have, be, or buy to finally deserve it. The result? People going into debt to maintain an image. People feeling frustrated because they believe others' lives are more colorful than theirs. But all of this is theater. Well staged, but empty. We've been taught that happiness is out there, in a new car, an ideal body, a trip abroad. But the truth is, when your peace depends on something you need to buy, you're shackled. Consumption has become identity. You are what you wear, they say. But what if you're more than that? What if your worth isn't the brand of your clothes, but in the truths you carry? The problem is, when we're trapped in this system, any attempt to be different feels like rebellion. And maybe that's what it is, an act of rebellion, to stop chasing what others expect, to choose to live with less, but with more truth, to reconnect with what's essential, not to become a monk, but to stop being a puppet. Because when you start looking at yourself with honest eyes, you realize that what truly fulfills you is never for sale. And then a kind of freedom emerges, one that doesn't depend on Wi-Fi, applause, or likes. But, of course, this kind of freedom comes at a price. Courage, and not everyone is willing to pay it. We live in an era where plurality is celebrated, as long as you think like the majority. Take a look. There's an invisible pressure for everyone to have the same opinions, the same values, the same behaviors. Questioning has become synonymous with offense. Having your own thoughts, a different perspective, is now treated as a deviation. The curious thing is that this control isn't always explicit. It comes disguised as acceptance. But in practice, the system doesn't want conscious individuals. It wants fitted pieces, functioning without friction. The fear of being judged has become one of the main brakes on authentic thinking. Most people prefer to follow the flow, rather than risk being criticized. This happens even in the simplest choices: what to wear, what to consume, what to say. And little by little, the human being fades away. They suffocate their own ideas to fit in. They mold their desires to others' molds. Authenticity becomes a threat, because being authentic requires confrontation. And confrontation requires strength. It requires being willing to lose the audience's applause to maintain your own integrity. But the world doesn't change with more of the same. Progress has always been born from difference, rebellion, the audacity to think outside the box. Being different today is an act of courage. And more than that, it's a cry for freedom. Because when you think with your own head, no one can manipulate you easily. No one sells you a packaged truth. No one forces you to follow a script you didn't write. And maybe, in the end, that's what the system fears most. People who, even in silence, think too loudly. There are days when it feels like everyone is present, but no one is really there. You know that feeling of being surrounded by people but feeling alone? It's becoming more and more common. Relationships have become shallow. Conversations have turned into emoji exchanges. Hugs have been replaced by reactions. And without realizing it, we become experts at disguising feelings. Pain? Hide it. Longing? Pretend you don't feel it. Sadness? Put on a filter and post a smiling selfie. But deep down, everyone is begging for real connection. And why does this happen? Because we've been trained not to feel too much, not to show weakness, not to bother. In the name of practicality, we've anesthetized our emotions. But without emotion, there's no depth, no lasting bond, no truth in touch, in gaze, and presence. And it's in this scenario that immediate pleasure sneaks in as relief. A notification, a compliment, a like, all of it becomes a kind of digitized affection. But no pixel replaces a sincere gaze. No screen truly hugs. The challenge is to relearn how to feel, to allow discomfort, to talk while looking into each other's eyes, to listen without rushing, to sit in silence, together. It seems simple, but it takes effort, because it goes against haste, distraction, superficiality. And when you start practicing this, something changes. You discover that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's strength. That show what you feel is a way to free yourself. And that behind the masks, everyone just wants the same thing, to be truly seen. True freedom was never about doing whatever you want. It was always about not being a slave to anything. Not to pleasures, not to opinions, not to unconscious habits. It's an internal process, slow, but deeply transformative. And it starts with something simple yet powerful: awareness. Realizing that you're trapped, even if you think you're free. Realizing that you're living on autopilot, that your choices aren't entirely yours. And when this realization hits, it hurts, but it also liberates. Because only when you're awake can you start walking. Rebuilding this inner freedom takes courage. Courage to face pain without distracting yourself. To be present without needing to escape. To look at yourself honestly and say, I was lost, but now I see. And it's not a path of perfection. It's a path of presence. It's about starting small, reducing stimuli, revisiting priorities, silencing more, feeling more, choosing with more intention. And little by little, what seemed like a prison begins to dissolve. You start to realize you've always had the key. You just didn't know where to look. Consciousness is the antidote. When you start observing yourself, questioning, deciding based on truth rather than reaction, the game changes. Pleasure doesn't disappear, but it stops being a master. Technology doesn't vanish, but it becomes a tool. Emotions don't fade, but they gain space. And in this process, you reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget: your essence. The part of you that doesn't sell out, doesn't get lost, doesn't dilute itself. And then, perhaps for the first time, you feel what it truly means to be free.